Welcome to the 22nd edition of the Times Techies webinar series. My name is Sujit John, and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Fadnis. The two of us will moderate this discussion. IT and technology services, that's what India has been best known for the past over 2 decades. We were not much into creating software products. Microsoft Windows is a product, Google Search is a product. You create it once and you could have millions of people buying or using it. Software products require that you identify a market or visualize a market, and then you design and develop a product for that market, and then you try to sell it. It's a different skill set than doing services. The good news is today in India, the environment is changing. More and more of big technology companies and startups are building software products in India, for the world. Research from IDC estimates that software will grow at twice the rate of services and hardware in the total technology spend. The COVID-19 pandemic has further underlined the importance of software and platforms. Diverse areas spanning CRM, customer relationship management, data, AI, human capital management, and collaborative platforms have become extremely promising for product development. Today's webinar, which we are hosting in association with NASSCOM, will discuss this emerging environment of software products. And we have with us some of the best people who can talk on the subject. We have with us Rohini Srivathsa. Rohini is a National Technology Officer at Microsoft's India operations. He's responsible for leading strategic initiatives to accelerate digital transformation across industries and the government. Rohini began her career in R&D at AT&T Bell Laboratories in the US. Prior to joining Microsoft, she was in strategy consulting at the Boston Consulting Group and IBM Global Business Services. Welcome, Rohini. We have with us Ramkumar Narayanan. Ram is VP of Technology at VMware, and he's Managing Director of VMware India. He's focusing on data-driven digital product innovation involving various consumers and enterprise markets. His expertise lies in product development, product management, and product marketing. Prior to VMware, Ram served in global leadership positions in eBay, Yahoo, and Microsoft. Welcome, Ram.
Thank you.
We have with us Manav Garg. Manav is the founder and CEO of Eka, and he's one of those who has built a software product that is globally successful. Manav started Eka in 2004 with the vision to modernize commodity management. Eka's software manages trading and risk for companies in agriculture, energy, mining, and metals. It has solutions for supply chain and sustainability and financial management. Eka's customers are the likes of Unilever, Cargill, and Rio Tinto. Welcome, Manav. We have Monish Darda. Monish is co-founder and CTO of iCertis, another globally successful product venture from India. Monish has overseen development of iCertis as a cloud-based contract management platform, a platform that is used by companies like Airbus, Daimler, Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft, and Sanofi to manage some 7.5 million contracts worth more than $1 trillion. Monish has also led successful deployments of cutting-edge AI and blockchain technologies for iCertis. Welcome, Monish.
Thank you so much, Sujit.
And we have with us Atul Batra. Atul is CTO of Manthan. Manthan too is a globally successful venture from India offering SaaS-based analytics and AI products that are used by retail and consumer businesses in over 25 countries. Atul is also the chair of the NASSCOM Product Council and a member of the NASSCOM Executive Council. Atul has been a great source for Shilpa and me in identifying great product companies in India so that we can showcase them on the Times Techies page. Welcome, Atul. Those who are viewing this can send in questions through the chat box. Shilpa and I will put them to the panelists. So let me start by asking to begin with, and I'll request Ram and Rohini to start off. How do you see the evolution of the Indian product ecosystem? Where has it reached? And how is the pandemic changing the environment? Ram, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sujit, and thanks for having us here. It's great to be among friends. And when we talk about the ecosystem, I think it's, this panel is actually reflective of what it takes to grow an ecosystem over time, right? I mean, many of us have been working together, and what's been fulfilling is the fact that, we trade in our badges when it comes to the ecosystem, right? We've kind of all jumped in over the years to help, to move this forward. And it has, moved forward in leaps and bounds in some sense, right? And where we are today, I think, is a good place to be in some sense. Obviously, we have to put the pandemic in the backdrop. But even having said that, I think we have come a long way, even the last few years, of bringing, both emerging companies forward, as well as looking at more traditional enterprises and helping them through the digitization process, which is coming up to speed now. So the ecosystem is actually poised for its next wave of growth, in my opinion. And I'd love to, and we can talk further as we move forward in the discussion.
Okay, Rohini?
Yeah, sure. So, just to add to what Ram is saying, is putting some numbers into picture here, and these are NASSCOM numbers. We've had just in 2019, some 1,300 startups that have been added into the ecosystem. Now, which is the total number comes to around 9,000 startups. Interestingly, the number of unicorns that are active in India has been really a very heartening number, because that's the place where you can talk about the startups really gaining scale. So there are right now some 24 unicorns active in India, 7 just added in the last year. I think the numbers, of course, there's lots more numbers out there, but I think what it tells us is that while there is a healthy ecosystem, there are also the right trends that are coming into picture to have these startups scale and scale at a global level. And of course, in the later part of the conversation, we should talk about the why and what and how of it given the current context. But that is to me, the great heartening part of the Indian product ecosystem story, that it is very vibrant, and there are really clear role models out there which are able to go global at scale.
Okay, thanks, Rohini. A great ecosystem developing, helping each other. Manav, I like the point that before this we were discussing. You said the pandemic is a Y2K moment in some sense for this ecosystem. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so just taking from the point that on the ecosystem development. So all of us have been working on the ecosystem development for almost last 10 years now. But I think the whole story of SaaS was waiting in the wings, because there was slow adoption on the corporate large enterprise side. There were certain new areas and new categories like CRM and support, which grew really fast. But the large scale adoption was missing that big flip. While good or bad in pandemic, that has happened, right? So almost 10 years worth of digital acceleration has happened in the last 6 months now. So all of us have gone
10
from
years worth of, sorry, what?
Digital acceleration, right?
Okay.
So the large companies who were waiting in the wings and see, okay, first we move to cloud, they will talk to Azure and Amazon, and then they will start moving their not so mission critical software on the cloud. So you saw expense management and periphery software going on. Then people moved to CRM. And now people are moving to core mission critical softwares like ERP, supply chain, everything moving down to cloud. And also newer categories are emerging, which are more virtual office, remote working, collaboration, and vertical softwares in various travel, hospitality, community management, all areas also, which has been technology laggard, are now adopting technology. So that combined, digital acceleration along with the readiness of the ecosystem, which is a lot of base work which has happened over the last 10 years, is giving us this opportunity to now start scaling, because everybody out there is looking for a software to work. Okay. If you have to put a team together working in 5 different countries, you need to have some software, whether you use Zoom, Microsoft Team, or Slack, or a combination of Notion along with it. You'll have to have a productivity software to a mission critical software. You actually today start the company with a cloud landscape. That's what I'm really happy to see. As you think through your team, you also think, what is my cloud landscape going to look like? So I think that is what is I am most, and I think all of us are very excited about.
Okay. Monish, you see some similar trends?
Yeah, I think, and I'll go on a limb here. I think it's very interesting. One is, the pandemic's just shown us the tip of the iceberg in my mind. It's the collaboration software, people who can work remotely together. That's just the starting point. I think the big flip I see is, we have been doing $1 million deals over the phone and video. Never happened ever in the history of the company last 10 years. I'm
really?
Sure. Yeah, none of the people here, I'm sure, have experienced that before in their lifetimes. If they have, they've been very lucky. But not meeting the customer physically at all, not flying into, San Francisco or Boston or Frankfurt to close deals. I think that flip has actually been probably the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot there that will come from here, which means that the ecosystem in India can now actually really, really take off, because the sales and the support and the professional services and the implementation can actually happen from India. I think that, people got to a very hard realization through the last few months that, hey, this can happen. This can actually take place. It's real. And once you get used to that, even customers get used to that, they're going to hate flying all over the place, which means, your salespeople can be in India, your support can be in India, which, a lot of companies kind of start with support from India and implementation from India. But at the level of enterprise software, you have to have a big presence outside if your market is outside. Now that's kind of turning in. And that's why, make in India and make for the world can really, really go places from here. I think the second thing, and if I may take just one thing, because something that Ram mentioned as well, I think one of the things that has happened is cloud has always been there in the enterprise. It's not, definitely anything new. I think the realization that, hey, there is no choice, and that asking for an on-prem solution now is stupidity in a lot of ways, right? Is what the realization has been in the last 6 months. And I think that 10-year digital transformation in 6 months that Manav referred to, and a lot of world leaders, including Satya, alluded to, has been real, right? And I think that is what is going to be our next step in this journey in the ecosystem.
If I may just jump into what Monish,
sure, Rohini.
Just to make it a conversation, to what Monish and earlier you mentioned, Sujit, the Y2K moment, right? And after that, Tom Friedman had this, the world is flat. I think this is, another big moment of being able to sell the multi-million-dollar deals. But I think it's also required people to develop skills to do that.
Absolutely.
Right, because the ability to collaborate virtually, ability to transact these large deals and really be customer sensitive and understanding the context, some of those have been learnings for us in terms of being able to be available that way. And I think the element of that is probably goes back into many sectors where the whole transaction and delivery of the service is changing. And we go down healthcare, we go down many other industries where, and therein probably lies a lot of opportunities.
Atul, you work with so many of these product startups. What do you see? I mean, the same kind of excitement now, or are they also in some trouble because of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. But firstly, Sujit and Shilpa, I want to thank you for having us on this panel. I really want to thank my fellow panelists. Someone talked about pay it forward culture. These people really represent that culture, and that's why, we have this opportunity. So let me take a more historical and a philosophical view first. I always like to say thousands of years back, India actually led the world in GDP, right? We had 20 to 30% of the GDP. We were the largest innovator, if not one of the largest, right? And let me ask all of you, to be very honest, when was the last time anyone mentioned India and innovation in the same breath, right? So I think the point is we have an opportunity to change that narrative with technology and products specifically. I mean, if you look at the big picture, I think software products by itself was last estimated to be a $500 billion pie, growing very fast to $1 trillion. And, Manav is a big proponent of SaaS, and that's sort of driving a lot of that. Nearly 1/4 or 1/5 of all global IT spend is now, getting into packaged products, right? Now the weakness is, not so good news is we have less than 1% of global market share here from India. We're at about 9 billion industry, right? But the good news is, I mean, we are at a very big point of inflection. Products are being massively rewritten due to cloud and AI and, other types of deep tech, all the automation, intelligence, and certainly COVID has sort of accelerated that. Secondly, as we all know, we are standing on the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, and that flywheel is ramping up very fast, as many call it out, right? Tech talent, right? I mean, thanks to our IT services companies and, the whole technical talent that was built out right from the 50s, right? I mean, we sit on a massive opportunity. I mean, in fact, think about our IT services companies are sitting in every single account in the world. That's the kind of talent we have access to. And by the way, IT services companies are no pushover. I mean, TCS last year reported over $1 billion of product revenue, right? So the point is we sit on a massive foundation to go on to become a world leader for products and replicate the success of IT services with product. I think the interesting sign is if you look at the government, Sujit, I mean, they have come up with a national software product policy, right? That's a very strategic move. So the government recognizes the strategic importance of software products. we have a goal in our industry and, working with Mighty and all, a 10x goal to grow our pie by 10x in the next 5 years. Very aggressive, but I think we can do that. Now, coming to the pandemic, I think we have to recognize the difficult situation our entrepreneurs in particular are in. From the last data, there was a recent tie-in Zinnov report that said about 15% of startups actually shut down right after the pandemic. 50% had less than 6 months of cash runway. But there's a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So I think we are seeing tremendous resilience. We are seeing, I would say, character is the word that comes to mind. Obviously, hospitality, travel, a lot of sectors are, very, very badly impacted, but we are seeing great signs, like everyone mentioned, around anything that's kind of digital, whether it's food delivery, digital payments, health tech, ed tech is seeing a big, curve up, right? So I think we're seeing tremendous opportunities. And now I think in the last 2-3 months, we are seeing the investment environment come back to pre-COVID levels. I think the early stage, the seed stage is still, trying to rebound, right? But I think all the signs are very promising.
Yeah, great. Feel free to jump in, any of you. But I just want to ask Ram and Rohini to comment on the point that other three may. I mean, is this a Y2K moment for the product ecosystem? And also, what are companies like yours, VMware, Microsoft? How are you helping in this ecosystem?
No, absolutely. I think, there's, one of the things, if you look back, right, every big, dislocation that's happened, whether even if you go back just a short while ago to when the financial crisis happened, companies innovated and new companies got created and new markets got created. And I think, we are no different right now with the COVID crisis. We are in that moment, and I totally agree with Manav's point of view that this is a major dislocation. I mean, I call it a tear in the space-time fabric, right? And that is completely redefining experiences, like to what Manish talked about, and all of us, right? And what we are seeing is a couple of trends, right? To enable delivery of the software at scale. India represents, to all the other data that Atul talked about, one of the key points that we keep missing out is the fact that, if you look at developer base, for software developer base, right? India, based on various numbers, and if you triangulate it, India represents somewhere between 5 to 7 million professional and amateur developers, right? By comparative, US is about 8 to 9 million. So we are not that far away, okay? Now the question is, how do we retarget that developer base to make use of the new paradigms, whether it's SaaS, whether it is cloud, whether it is app modernization? Because one of the big things, if you look at large enterprises, and one of the reasons why they're held back in their digitization process, they have thousands and thousands of business applications that have been built over time, all the way from mainframes to PCs, right? All of that needs to be brought forward. And the only way to bring it forward is to utilization of cloud and utilization of modern techniques. And within cloud, multi-cloud is becoming a reality. I mean, it's no longer just, one or the other. It's not a winner take all, right? I think it's winner all of it. And one of the things that VMware has been, proud about the fact that, we are technology neutral. We have partnerships with all the mega cloud providers. We are one of the largest on-prem and private cloud providers, right? So for us to build those partnerships, we are starting to see that come together, and it's a moment of time in industry. I mean, when have we had people where you can have a equal partnership with large companies like Amazon on one side, Microsoft on the other, and Oracle, etc., and be able to bring everybody to have a neutral discussion? I think we are seeing this again and again, right? Where many of the CEOs are stepping in and saying, look, let's get together to go solve the world problem. Let's not worry about our own businesses to some extent. And so I think in that, that's a huge, powerful statement from the leaders of industry. We saw Apple and Google get together to say, look, for pandemic, our Bluetooth technologies need to be able to interact. Otherwise, we can't do contact tracing, right? I mean, it's not possible because these things are very, very fragile. Let's get together and figure out a way to actually create a platform. And we are seeing this again and again, right? The beneficiaries of this, for example, are going to be the startups, because now they don't need to go sell their wares independently. They get pulled in, right, into these discussions, because the entire ecosystem has to come together to actually solve a world problem. It is no longer one industry's problem versus another industry's problem. They're all getting together. Now that is a huge opportunity for us to build on, and I think India is well positioned to take advantage of that because of all the pieces we mentioned, right? We have the large enterprises to test our solutions on. And India's scale is our CEO, Pat Gelsinger, keeps talking about the fact that if you can build for India scale, it will work everywhere, right? And the complexities. Second is the SIs, the global SIs, who are very committed to kind of bringing together these technologies and going and solving real problems with a product lens. The third is a startup ecosystem, which I think, yes, it's challenging right now with COVID and everything else, but I'm a true believer, and I think as everybody else on this panel, that they'll come out stronger, and we will see the next wave of companies coming out of India has happened. E-commerce wave happened during the SARS crisis and back in 2000, early 2000s. The financial crisis threw up a whole bunch of companies which had got into the gig economy. I mean, if you think about where they took off, I think the time is right now for B2B companies to be brought forward, SaaS companies to come forward and kind of show the way in terms of where the future is going to lie. And I think India has a huge opportunity to bring that forward.
Great. Rohini?
Yeah, just to add to some of the points, echo some of the points Ram mentioned. And I think in the context that, Microsoft's own journey from being a software licensed product company to becoming a cloud, primarily a cloud product as well as platform company, right, has got some lessons in there. And in some ways, what we are seeing in the more recent times is India has become a laboratory for us for the world. And I'll talk about that sort of in three areas. One is just the ability to be agile and innovate. I think Monish and Manav talked about the fact that you cannot now imagine starting a company without thinking of the cloud as a strategy, right? So the ability to leverage what's on the platform and be agile and innovate very quickly. And for us, I think that element of India and in the current pandemic form, if you think about just the size of the digital India, right? If you think about the India stack, just the 1.2 billion people on Aadhaar, the level of billions of transactions on UPI, that kind of scale and for which we need to innovate. And in many ways, the Indian startup ecosystem ends up pushing us to innovate at that scale. And that takes, in fact, our global engineers say, give us these problems because it really helps us, be stronger. So that's the agility with innovation part. And then the scale and elasticity, again, the point about, the India, the size and the frugality of innovation you require, right? Because the price points are different. It's a mobile first. It's a multilingual, if you go to a tier 2, tier 3 towns, it's a very different demography you're going after. So if you can innovate for that, if you can be agile enough to work for that segment, you can pretty much face the world. And the third thing that to your point about, and which Ram talked about is go to market, because Indian startups will need to think about India as a market, but really think global. And that ability to really go global is one of the ways that we think about Microsoft as from our own experience, as well as working with startups in taking startups global. But then bringing it all together to given pretty much, if you think of our big products, each one of them has got some developer base that's from India. So our investment into the developer ecosystem in the country is for our own benefit as well as for the ecosystem, right? So there are tons that's going on, whether it's on the AI front or quantum, you name it. That is, we are engaging on the developer ecosystem in terms of training and certifications, etc. We can talk more about it.
Okay. And Rohini, I can second that. Sorry.
Okay, let Monish.
Yeah.
I was just saying, Rohini, I can support that because 100% of our engineering is in India, and Microsoft has been a partner right from our inception. So it's been a lot of ecosystem work that's been needed for Azure to kind of get to the next level, the platform to get to the next level.
We appreciate the partnership. Thank you.
Yeah, Sujit, what I was pointing third element to this, which is the capital raising. Started in 2004. There were no angel funds and VCs were very rare. So I think what is also fueling all this is the extraordinary amount of risk taking as compared to, let's say, 5 years back. Today, from angel to Series A to Series B, Series C's, there is enough and more capital available for the startups.
Even for B2B?
That also is,
even for B2B?
B2B is right now extremely hot. Yeah, extremely hot. The number of deals, So capital,
there's a free... interesting. Sorry, Manav, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt.
No. So I think that is also what is fueling. So it's an opportunity. availability of talent in terms of services talent, product talent, ecosystem. And the third element also is the availability of capital, which is allowing people to take the risk and even fail. It's okay. People fail and they say, like what Atul mentioned, yes, 15-20% of even SaaS startups may have closed, but all those entrepreneurs are more valuable because they got really good jobs as growth officers or CTOs in other growing startups, right? Because it's kind of a reset button for the entire ecosystem. Some of the companies were affected, but some of the companies were extremely got the extreme benefit of the COVID, and some are therefore going to start new, right? So I think we should also recognize that the investors have also played a very big part by bringing that risk capital along with the entire ecosystem and entrepreneurs.
Okay, Monish, you were saying something?
Yeah, and Manav triggered that. I'm actually on the investment committee of a venture fund that is purely based for targeted to B2B SaaS companies in Pune.
Okay.
And it's incredible, how much money has been kind of coming in the SaaS business, in the B2B business as well. But these kinds of focus funds also help grow the ecosystem very quickly. So completely, support what Manav said. I think this is one of those catalysts that is necessary for people to take risks, leave good jobs, and go in there. I think one of the things the pandemic has done has forced people from hospitality and travel and education to kind of go in and say, hey, we want to build software for different ways.
Okay, very, very interesting to hear this. Okay, so money, which was earlier all going primarily to internet companies, consumer internet companies. Now, Atul, you see the same thing? Product companies, B2B companies, quite happy with the fund flow now?
Yeah, it's interesting trend, Sujit. We run this Emerge 50 Awards. We're in the 12th year now. It's been a great early trend spotter for some of these trends. So in the last couple of years, we've seen a huge shift from B2C to B2B. There is B2C, but there's a lot of B2B happening, as everyone mentioned. I think the funding environment, people may not realize there are 400 plus active institutional investors in India, today, which is really growing every year. We have 500 incubators, accelerators, right? So things are really in the uptick. On SaaS, I know Manav is a big proponent of that. I mean, if you look at one very impressive metric, we have 150 plus SaaS companies that have revenue north of 1 million, right? So we have a massive, bottom of the pyramid. And then, there's a pyramid structure as we released a report earlier this year. So I think there's tremendous, and, companies like Y2K and Manthan, my company, sitting out of India, building a global product business. And we did business in India about 5 years back only out of our 15-year journey. So today we consider ourselves one of the global leaders for analytics and AI on the cloud, as a SaaS business serving global retail and consumer markets, right? We serve about 25 countries. We're on an M&A tier. So we're seeing a lot of lift for anyone looking at digital first, anyone looking to, have a phygital, particularly, there's a lot of brick and mortar, right? All, verticals, not only retail, right? So everyone is now with the pandemic accelerating to understand their customers better, personalize the experiences, trying to drive it all through algorithms, right? That's the new mantra, right? So there's tremendous things happening. SaaS as a business model and machine learning, NLP, computer vision as sort of some of the technologies, right? From the deep tech stack. And one of the things, Sujit, you mentioned, I know I surfaced to you and Shilpa, a lot of our deep tech companies, we started this club about 4 years back called NASSCOM Deep Tech Club. We looked at over 1,000 deep tech companies. We got 80 in over 4 years, and we have about 100 mentors. Many of them are on this panel. And today, I mean, we are seeing very promising signs of really disruptive innovation coming out of India. I mean, that's the most exciting thing to me, besides the, the financial piece and the revenue and all. We are really seeing net new innovation coming out of India. And, coming to some of the challenges, Ram talked about the consumption in India. I think Indian businesses and SMEs really need to come to the party for our products and startups. They need to start adopting them. The larger enterprises need to make it a, experiment playground, if you will, because,
what is the challenge there, you think? What is the mindset that is blocking it? Yeah,
to be very honest, I mean, understanding innovation and how it happens, right? The culture is probably, it'll take a while. And, it's a cycle. Even the Valley, it took decades, right? So, I keep saying Silicon Valley is as much a consumption story as it's an innovation story. So I think why the time is right in India is because, if our enterprises, and Reliance is a very good example, they're technology led, right? And they're going to disrupt most sectors they enter. I think in India, every business in the next 4 or 5 years, if they're not deeply integrating deep tech, and by deep tech, we mean, again, machine learning, NLP, computer vision, blockchain, AR, VR, robotics, IoT, all of that, right? If they do not integrate that tightly into every business process, every use case, every role, every task, right? I think they could be on a death spiral. I mean, it's that clear. Next 4 or 5 years, they need to start that experimentation today. So I think they need to embrace our startup ecosystem, not only on the funding side, but to consume them, to start to adopt some of the products, do POCs and all. And that, I think is the massive opportunity in front of us.
I think, Atul, add to your points, I see actually early signs of actually the e-commerce wave is also fueling the SaaS wave in Kirana stores. They are coming like Dukaan, OK Credit, Khata Book. I think they are adopting for the first time where they're automating their accounts, they're automating their storefronts on the internet, which is actually fueled by the larger internet wave, which was the first wave of where e-commerce started. But I am able to see the early signs of the software adoption in SMEs with this. It's totally a reverse move, totally counterintuitive, but it's beginning to happen.
Yeah, true. Yeah, Metro Cash and Carry, Geo, everybody's doing it. Yeah, Ram, you wanted to say something?
No, sorry, I was just going to add a couple of other little more somber points to this. Is the fact that while there is a lot of enthusiasm and all the things are very positive as we talk about, I think one thing to watch too. There are two things that I would think we need to watch out for. One is security, right? Because as this fuels adoption of digitization across the board, right, various sectors and sizes of companies, security becomes really, really critical. Protection of data, protection of privacy, security in a deeper sense. And security cannot be bolt on anymore, right? I think one of the big realizations, if you look at the trends in the security models, is that in the past it was all about patching, right? I mean, we run various kinds of security models and applications and solutions on various kinds of machines. But that model is no longer fueling because, I'll give you a simple example. In the COVID, when on March 25th, when everybody started working from home, we were connecting from relatively insecure networks, right? From our home networks, which are, they could as well be wide open, connecting through devices which are probably not very protected. And we have customers, large customers, enterprise customers, who are desktop customers, right? I mean, they were desktop people, but maybe they were using, virtual desktops within the environment of their offices and banks, kind of, for example, with their branches, etc. But even bank, employees started working from home and they didn't have a laptop. They didn't have a company issued laptop. They had to connect from their home PC, which would have been inherently unsafe, connecting through an inherently unsafe network infrastructure back into their enterprise and having to do all of this, right? I mean, I'm sure it was a CIO's nightmare trying to deal with it, and the CISO's nightmare trying to figure out how to do security in this environment. And we've been getting into a lot of those discussions. So I think that's a very key area to think about. Second area that's coming up is the pandemic is not going to go away. I mean, in the sense that, even the current pandemic, and we may be seeing more and more of this, whether it's climate change, in fact, the projection is that climate change is going to throw up even more, challenges at all of us compared to even this, the COVID pandemic, right? So I think there's a big move that we are also seeing from both enterprises, customers, small and large, saying that, look, we need resilient solutions. We need to have, the focus on how to get much more, efficient about how we do this with purpose in mind, right? With sustainability and all of that. How do you reduce consumption? How do you reduce, footprints, large footprints of data centers? I mean, one of the other sides of cloud adoption is, massive data centers, right? They're consuming a lot of power and cooling and all the other things that come with it. How do you get more efficient about that? And I know every company, large enterprise companies, software companies are starting to think about it. I think one of the advantages of software is inherently flexible, right? You reduce the footprint of hardware in order to, make use of software. But that's the second trend. So these two trends of security and a purpose of sustainability and being, much more tech for good in some sense, right? How do we think about that? I think those are two areas that we see threaded through large enterprises to startups coming up as well.
Okay. We have some questions from the audience. Once, Shilpa.
Hi, Sujit. Yeah, we have this question from Sachin Singh. I'm from Dehradun, working in Bangalore. I am determined to go back to my hometown and start a product company. What are some of the, existing, support system that I can look forward to when I start my company.
So basically, he wants to start a company in Dehradun.
Yeah, he's working in Bangalore, but he wants to go back to his hometown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start and
yeah, go ahead, Atul.
Yeah. So I think one of the trends as we are seeing with the pandemic is people working from their hometowns and villages also, and we have some great stories of people trying to start up from villages. And at NASSCOM we are calling this whole area Work 2.0. In fact, this coming NPC, the product conclave, there'll be a big track around Work 2.0, which is the big shift, in terms of how not only working remotely, but building companies remotely, selling remotely. I think one of you talked about doing $1 million contracts through a low touch model, right? And I think this and we are seeing a lot of products now coming there that enable this, right? So that's what we want to capture. But I completely agree. Today, your physical location really does not matter as long as you have the infrastructure. If you're especially building a SaaS business, and on SaaS again, our thesis is, I think we barely scratched the surface, probably 0.1% of use cases that could be SaaSified, through technology, and that'll add value to business. So I think there's a massive opportunity. We have so many stories, Sujit, of, multi-million-dollar run rate SaaS companies from tier 2, like Indore and all, right? So that is happening. So as long as you have the infrastructure connectivity, there's no stopping you. In terms of forums, NASSCOM runs a number of programs. The good thing is we have a very community-driven approach. We run, like the Deep Tech Club. We have NASSCOM 10K Warehouse, which is getting more virtual. We have various other forums where there's mentoring. All the people again on the panel help that. So I would encourage people to get involved with those communities and learn from other practitioners.
Okay. Anybody?
And also, in addition to that, I think apply to online accelerators and all this. There are various forums where you can apply and start getting the first few basics get done.
Okay.
I think I just want to add one thing. I think it's a very interesting question in different ways. One is kind of not just having a founder in a place like Dehradun, but also finding a co-founder without any borders now. So, it's easier now than it was ever before to actually have a founder in India and a founder in the US or a founder in Europe or in Australia for that matter. The time zone differences are changing, our behaviors are changing. 4 or 5 years, we were talking about SMAC, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. That was actually stemming from a change in social behavior. We will see, I'm 100% sure, that social behavior change just because of the scale of the pandemic that's coming. And as Ram referred to, this also applies to climate change, applies to things that will now change our lives forever and our behavior forever. And I think this kind of stuff where you'll see more and more of the small town or just agnostic to where you are working from kind of startups come together. I think one of my biggest kind of interesting companies to look for were OnePlus, the phone company, where the software was delivered, was written by 7 or 8 people all over the world.
Really?
Yeah, so it's quite a stunning, quite a very, quite a interesting story in terms of how this can be done at a scale, which is very interesting.
Okay. You have a strong presence in Pune, and then also Samir is in the US, is he?
Samir is in the US, yes.
Okay.
And we also launched something called iCertis Everywhere. So my co-founder is in the US. All of our engineering is here, 100%. And we also have now an iCertis Everywhere where we, for all global positions, we hire globally. So it's been a very interesting experiment that's really worked for us as well.
Just to add to an earlier comment and this point about startups from different places, the student community, even in the more recent days, when you go and ask students what do they want to become when they graduate, the number of people who just raise their hands to become entrepreneurs is extremely heartening. And some of my very interesting examples is one startup which is from Bits Pilani, a small town, right? But these guys have been working in the education space using augmented reality, and they recently won a competition in Finland, right? In this pandemic times, because again, location was irrelevant, and so passionate about the space. So I feel like again, this location being irrelevant and probably more in our minds than in realities is an important one to really internalize.
Shilpa, any questions?
We have this question.
Ram was saying something.
No, I was just going to say that
Yeah.
I think adding to the trend is, the large companies are also moving down this path, right? I mean, we have announced our future of work, which allows people to work from wherever they want to.
Okay.
I know Microsoft announced it recently. I think, I've seen these large companies starting to do this as well. So we are removing the geo tag on all our job openings so that people can apply, right? We are not going to be, and we are starting to think of our offices as collaboration hubs that people can visit if they want to, rather than they have to come into work every day. So I think, all of these trends will just make it more normal that people can be everywhere and anywhere and work to Manisha's point, etc. Right? So I think that's a big change. When the elephants start to dance, I think that starts to signal something.
No, absolutely. This is exactly TCS with 4.5 lakh employees are talking the same language now.
Right.
I mean, they're talking about just 25% of their employees coming to office in 5 years.
Sujit, I want to add another point. See, very important around our product ambition for our country's skills. NASSCOM is very focused on skills and programs like Future Skills. On the product side, we are building a community movement and we call it #IndiaProductified. Our goal is in the next year or so to enlist 1 lakh people, a lot of them from our existing IT workforce, and get them into products. They could be in IT services companies, they could be in a multinational, they could be in an Indian software product company. And there are some key, one very critical crown jewel role is product management, right? I mean, we know that we have very strong technical talent, but building a product is very nuanced. So, product management globally remains the most key role, and there's a, big scarcity in India in particular. So there's a lot of focus on building PM skills and getting people into product management, like from colleges, people doing their MBAs or, doing their engineering degrees. So that's one area. Second area is around the whole monetization, sales, marketing, inside sales, pre-sales, all the product, marketing again, storytelling, soft skills, right? If you're to be a company sitting out of Indore selling to the US, right, you need to market well, right? Depending on which segment you're going after. So there's a lot of focus on building those product skills, and it's a bottoms-up movement. We have hundreds of people from the community helping. In the last 1 year, we've done 100+ webinars. There's a very big, audacious goal there. I think that's going to create, the skills will create the scale for us to build products across the country, right?
Okay. Shilpa, any questions?
And there's this question from Gopal Palikal. At what revenue threshold would you say a product startup is taking off?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I can go first, maybe. I think it's an interesting question. I'll give you a very simple answer. I think it's, as a founder, when it is taking off. The product fit, how easy or hard it is to sell to customers, your pipeline. I think more than the revenue, though revenue is very important, of course. I mean, that's the only thing at the end that matters. And also when you go to raise money, that becomes a big factor. But as a founder, you probably know when you're taking off. It's that first indication of how you're selling and how your customers who are already customers are deriving value. And that's the cusp that every startup kind of goes through. This is my 7th startup in iCertis. So I've been doing startups all my life. And this is a question that's been asked many, many times in terms of, hey, where do you think, is it taking off? Is it like $1 million in revenue or $10 million in revenue? I say, when in iCertis, when we were $200,000 in revenue, we knew we were going to get to the $1 billion mark. So it was a very interesting thinking.
Okay. Shilpa, any more?
I think Mana was going to say something.
Mana wanted to
Yeah,
say
sure. Yeah, so I think obviously as a founding team, you will get to know when the business is going to take off. So I completely agree with Manish. But I think in terms of hard fact, I think depending upon which software you're creating, if you're creating a software for development community, which as Ram was mentioning, Atul, is a very large community, then it's more of the adoption. So Postman is an example of that. The revenue is small, but the valuation is like 50x over the revenue is, right? So I think if you are developing a software for development community or tech community, then it's a lot to do with the adoption of the development community. Even in the user base, for example, if you're creating a software for India, Dukans and all the small, there is adoption. So they may be getting the software for free. But if the adoption rate is 400% per year and every dukaan is buying your software and getting online in 1 minute and 2 minutes, then it's a success from your perspective. Then monetization can happen later in the day. If you're selling to larger adoption, of course, revenue and adoption is a bit longer. It takes a bit longer to sell. So I think it depends on the model you're taking in. The parameters range from adoption to to revenue. But in this day and age and going forward, I think adoption is going to be one of the very, very big key metric, whatever you're doing, as at what pace it is growing. So revenue may come a bit later, but adoption is going to be the paramount.
Adoption and churn, absolutely.
If I can add to that, Sujit, one in product land, we call it product market fit. When it really depends on what you mean by taking off. Is it revenue? But when you have product market fit, you can go after a lot of revenue.
Okay. How do you determine product market fit?
That's a very good, it really depends on your technology, what your use cases are, what segment you're going after, what geography. But when you've built a product that customers are willing to pay for, and several of them are willing to pay for, right? Then you have product market fit. And at that point, you want to really invest in scaling that whole machinery, sales, marketing, inside sales, everything I spoke about.
Okay.
The biggest indicator of product market fit is repeatability. Yeah. So if you can repeat the sale over to same customer or same persona, like a CFO or a CMO or anybody in the department, that means your product market fit is beginning to happen. So the speed of that repeatability will determine the product market fit.
Okay.
And there's very interesting, I think, Manav and Atul, I think you said this very interesting in an interesting way. But what happens typically is when the curve where you're selling and engineering is building, where the curve is you're selling well, and now engineering is kind of inundated with feature requests. That's where you know that people are demanding more and they want more features and they're adopting this value, they're willing to pay more. I think that's the, from a founder perspective, you'll see that happen. You'll feel that happen where sales comes back and says, hey, I've already made the deal, but we need these 2 features to make sure that the customer goes live.
Yeah, we have this question from Gopal. I represent Malabar Angel Network from Kerala. We do not have too many product companies in our state. Most entrepreneurs still want to do services companies. What should we do to change the culture?
Atul, you want to take that?
I would say come attend NASSCOM Product Conclave. Sorry for the plug. And it's virtual, by the way. In January, it's virtual. No, but we do host NPC in the good times. We do host one, and I think in Kerala we've done a few. Like Trivandrum is a great place for blockchain. So Sujit, we are starting to see centers in India where there are pockets of synergy. So I think there are there are good product companies emerging. I think it's about community. I think we are talking in this whole panel about community paid forward. I think what's different for India at this point of time is the collaboration that's happening in the ecosystem, where people are willing to share knowledge and mentor and give back. And I think that's why we are so bullish about the potential and how we can accelerate from here. So I think people have to reach out. There are a lot of online forums like we spoke about. Not only NASSCOM, there are various associations that are driving different pieces of the pie. So I would say get out and discover.
Yeah, I think I agree with Atul on this. Having seen this ecosystem evolve over time, I think there are a couple of forces that act. One is the fact that exposure. So I think being immersed in communities that are starting to talk product and kind of working in that environment, whether it's virtual now, it's much easier. The second is the anxiety and the impatience to get to revenue. And I think for product companies, for all the points that were just made about product market fit, there's a certain amount of patience required from building the solution to getting customer acceptance and then being able to monetize it. And I think there is a pull towards, towards revenue very early on. And that pushes companies towards saying, look, I need to generate revenue. Let me get into services. And hence the product becomes a secondary dialogue than the revenue dialogue. And so that pulls companies towards that. So I think a certain amount of all things that Atul also talked about, the work that NASSCOM's product council skill development is doing around product mindset. I think that is very important for people to start understanding it and moving in that direction. And there's so much more available. I think SaaS Boomi has been doing a fantastic job of getting companies together and building that mindset in people. So I think it's just a question of getting their cohorts to experience all the other things that's available to them around them.
I think also I see a good trend. The 2-3 questions are coming from remote places, right? So far it was Bangalore, Pune, and NCR region, which is known as hubs of software or product to come here and use startup. But I think maybe as ecosystem players will also have to think about how to disseminate the virtual presence also a bit better. That's what my takeaway from these 2 questions are, because one from Dehradun, one from Kerala.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what signifies this trend. We also have to do more knowledge dissemination virtually across these tier 2, tier 4 cities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something for NASSCOM.
Sujit, one thing I want to point out, we are talking about remote work. A lot of our MNC companies decades back in the Valley had more than half their workforce working remotely. That's number. Number 2, if you look at the open source movement, decades old, like look at Linux, thousands of contributors, committing into the same code base, right? So the model exists and it's very successful. Even the commercial ones like a Red Hat. So I think we need to embrace the open source mindset, the community mindset. And, there's a saying, innovation happens elsewhere. I think there's tremendous opportunity. If you look at, Indians are so smart, right? Technically so, sharp, right? So I think Ram called it out, product mindset, understanding. And like Munish was saying, you're not building per customer, you're not customer mindset centric, you're product mindset centric, right? So you're building a packaged offering that you can apply, templatize to multiple customers. That takes a little bit of shift of mindset. It's not technical capability, it's just focus and reorientation, right? So that's the culture we need to shift. Yeah, and one thing, if I can add to that, large part of this pie we are talking about is R&D. I don't think we can get ahead very much unless we invest in real R&D and innovation. And, if there was no Stanford, Silicon Valley would be a shade of what it is, right? Sun Microsystems, Google, numerous companies came out of just one institution. So in India, outside the IITs, Indian Institute of Science, there's not much collaboration happening between our product industry in particular and research and academia. And we need to somehow unlock that. I think that would be the second big thing besides, consumption in Indian enterprises, product consumption. Second big leg to the stool would be, massive funding and investment, including from the early stage segment. And we need a separate model for that, working with, professors and, researchers in academia around some of their pieces of their IP and evolving them. And then, that IP coming back more matured into the product, right? So I think that unless we solve that, that will be the single biggest metric for success of India as a product innovator. So I think that has a lot of headroom to improve on.
Okay. I just wanted to ask Rohini and any of you, government, anything more that you expect from the government to, in some sense, catalyze this entire environment? They already announced the product policy, of course, but beyond that now, is that policy itself working well? Anything else that you would look for?
I think the point that Atul mentioned on the skill development and incorporating and creating a larger network of institutions into the fold. So today IITs, of course, and ISC are fully integrated. But I am from REC. Yesterday I was on a panel on REC in Jalandhar. I think RECs and further we have almost like thousands of institutions which can actually catalyze the grassroots students and therefore more entrepreneurship. Now that you can be anywhere and think of a startup, right? I think that would really help because government has that power, because most of the institutions today at grassroots level are government institutes.
I would add a few points to what the government and some of the things that ties to the earlier comment that Atul was making on the NASSCOM startup thing in the tier 2 towns. So we were running a movement called a Highway to 100 Unicorns, and it was basically working across states. And the idea was to seed these startups in tier 2, tier 3 towns. And in every state where we ran this, the partnership was with the state government. to ensure that the government is a part of incubating and investing in the startup community, whether it's in the form of a startup pod or whatever format the government needs to take. So that's number one. So the state governments need to come forward in terms of really bridging in their own states a top few places where they want to really inculcate that. The second is the government and academia and industry partnership. In fact, the science, technology, innovation policy, which is being formed right now, 2020, and in fact, it's the 5th in the country's history since independence. One of the key points that are asked is that this need to have this tripartite partnership, especially in innovation of technologies which are forward-looking. It's just super critical. There's just no way the government can do by themselves, and the industry is working in their own back pocket, because it doesn't help in terms of either relevant innovation or building the skill ecosystem, or the governments being able to really leverage the industry and the ecosystem at scale. And the third thing I would point out is on the skilling part that Atul talked about. I think the fact that the government is putting out the National Digital Health Platform and many of the data related things that the government is coming out with, the skilling is important, but also availability of open data. So there's a movement that the government needs to have in terms of having their own data, which is open, available, so that the students who are learning these technologies can actually apply. Because these are not technologies that you can learn theoretically and sort of say you kind of have a sense for it. There are multiple initiatives that the government should be playing a strong role in. I just laid a point out about at least 3 of them which are top of my mind.
Absolutely, yeah. I think China, US, huge government role in all of this.
In fact, I was just talking to my colleague in the UK, and the London open data ecosystem is bringing out data in a way that the startups can innovate for services to be provided in the London metro system across different parts, whether it's transportation or or other logistics. And same thing has happened in Tokyo. So there are countries which are really going strategically at this to provide those ecosystems for startups to innovate on.
Great. Well, lots of questions coming in, I'm told. Shilpa?
Question is from Srinik. Tech companies mostly in the US are becoming more efficient and are automating what was traditionally outsourced to India. We are seeing startups discovering solutions to problems we didn't think we had. In the end, it'll be India that loses its jobs. Also, major AR, VR, and ML startups in India cannot go very far if India loses most of its talent to other countries. How do you think we can retain our product startup talent?
Rohini shaking her head.
I mean, again, we talked about the world going flat, right? We talked about, Monish is talking about his startup as to how it is. I talked about the fact that for Microsoft in India is pretty much most of our big products have a presence in India that's being developed. So in some respects, yes, we've had in the past what you may call the traditional brain drain, but there is enough of talent that's also looking to come back and engage in the Indian ecosystem. So I think it's also up to us as leadership community, as the pay forward that Atul talked about, in supporting the entrepreneurs who are looking to create businesses based out of here. I don't think, and in a way, I also feel proud that many of the large tech companies, the CEOs are Indian. So in some ways, I think we have done some things, quite right. And in a way, many of those are very invested in, also contributing to India's growth. So yeah, and very deeply committed to India as well.
I agree. I think it's, if nothing else, it is actually the reverse brain drain that's going to go on for the next few years. We've seen a lot of actually out of India folks coming in to work in India, which has never happened or very rarely happened before. I think that's that's something that we probably don't have to worry about. I think losing jobs, that is going to happen with these kinds of events at some point in different sectors for different reasons and so on and so forth. But you have to, at the end of the day, you have to look at the overall thing,
and reskill and all of that. Yeah, exactly.
One of the topics that keeps coming up in various forums that I've been part of in the past is I get a lot of questions, especially from young people asking, which language should they learn? Which technology should they learn? I think for many of us who've been in the industry for a long time, languages and technologies keep changing on a daily basis, right? Which is also the opportunity. I think what I would, and this doesn't matter if you're young in your career or mid career, or senior in your career, or kind of the other end of the spectrum. Constant learning is a given, right? Focusing on fundamentals is a given. I think what we need to see a lot more of is people starting to focus on fundamentals and not getting caught up in, I need to learn certain languages and learn certain technologies, because it's going to change, and part of that disruption, if you are more fundamentally anchored, gives you an opportunity to make use of the wave of new opportunities that's going to come up, right? Rather than getting caught. And I think that's been one of the big focus areas for NASSCOM, has been about reskilling. And reskilling is not about learning yet another technology. It's really understanding fundamentals. To the earlier point about mindset shift, how do you reframe yourself from being a services person to a product person, right? And this is happening, like, Atul pointed out, TCS has $1 billion of product revenue, and we are starting to see this in other services companies. So if you're working for one of these companies, it's not about learning your next coding language. It's really about understanding what are the shifts and what are the kinds of reframing your own mind to understand new waves of opportunities that are coming up and being able to go after that. To the point about AI and NLP and all of this new technologies. See, technology is one thing. Understanding the math behind it becomes even more important, because I think that's one of the things we get lost on, is the fact that these are applications of statistics and mathematics. And if your math skills and your stat skills, etc., are not strong enough, you're not going to be able to use this as yet another language that you're going to learn on how to do AI. And to that, we are starting to see, I think the point about the deep tech club, what is heartening to see there is people are solving hard problems, right? I mean, they're no longer just taking the cream off the top of the, the milk in some sense, which was happening. I think they're now learning to go after deeper problems, harder problems. And I think one of the things that the COVID crisis also shown us is the cross-disciplinary pieces, where biology and computer science need to come together, right? Where you get physics and chemistry coming together with something else. I think those taking advantage of that with software is going to be really the wave of the future. And the more people can get deeper there, and I would encourage young people to get back to their basics, right? Go look up your old books again and start learning again, because I think that really is going to stand you better over time.
Yeah. Sujit, I just want to add to that. See, automation and the evolution of intelligence is a global thing. It's not a by nation thing. So I think we all need to upskill, reskill, all of us, right? And every year there's disruption happening. I think in terms of products in India, I think people need to, if you look at the IT services industry, I mean, people had predicted a big decline. Knock on wood, I think last quarter there have been very good results, as both of you and Shilpa cover, right? So it's been heartening. What's happening is internally, IT services companies are embracing a lot of product things, platforms, frameworks, tools. They are upskilling and they are building IP internally. And the interesting thing is they are starting to work with the startup ecosystem, with the entrepreneurs, to understand what are these early disruptions happening. So, and that's the big opportunity for India, to ride on the shoulder of giants, our Indian software product companies, to leverage our IT services companies and the fact that they sit in every major account globally, right? Unlike China's IT and so on, right? I think that is the big opportunity. I just want to come back to the government bit. Government is trying to do a lot. The Honorable IT Minister, MIT, one of the areas we're working with them is to unlock the consumption of products, through policies like maybe tax incentives for Indian businesses that consume Make in India products, right? That's one area. Second is government procurement of products. So that whole process is getting better. There's the government e-marketplace, the GEM portal. I think that's getting good feedback now. So I think things are moving in the right direction. I think there's a massive opportunity. If you look at PSUs, railways, Hindustan Aeronautics and all, for innovation to come in from our startup ecosystem and product ecosystem, I think that would be the next big wave, waiting to happen.
Okay. My colleague at the back end, Vamsi, tells me that lots of questions coming in and people are getting upset that the questions are not being answered. So quickly, short answers to some of these questions if you can. 1 second. Yeah, Shilpa?
Yeah, this question is from Mihir. while we are talking about cloud adoption, what are some of the challenges in developing BFSI products? Will cloud providers like AWS or Azure address this?
Who wants to take that?
So that's
No, I think
an
I can
interesting
touch
problem.
upon it, and I'm sure others can add to it. I think we work with a lot of BFSI companies as as VMware, and a few of the trends that we are seeing. Right, cloud adoption is growing quite rapidly across that, and that's opening up the opportunity for them to provide new user experiences for their customers. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have not touched cash in 7 months, right? And then we have to thank UPI, and somebody had a forward view of how to build this. So I think there's a lot of disruption happening in the BFSI space in terms of user experiences, running their own operations. Like I mentioned to you, they are also learning how to operate from remote models, right? Where they don't necessarily see their customers on a daily basis. So BFSI is starting to adopt cloud technologies and the underlying infrastructure that's needed to power this. That's allowing them to actually deliver new applications on top. And actually that they're moving very fast, because I think they're realizing that they were further behind in a lot of ways, and they're trying to catch up very quickly.
Shilpa, next question.
Yeah. So how do product companies deal with increasing levels of mental stress due to erratic work hours becoming the norm in the pandemic world? There seems to be a difference in the work cultures of product companies and services companies. What thoughts?
Atul, you want to do that? Take that? Are you hearing issues that are emerging like this?
Yeah, I think mental health is a big issue always in the pandemic in particular. As you know, it's a more of a taboo topic in India, but I think people have started opening up. Like NASSCOM has done a lot, is doing a lot around, shining a light around mental health and what are the best practices. I think all our esteemed large companies here have very good best practices and, employee wellness programs. I think there's a lot to learn from each other. So it is a big issue, and I think more needs to be done there.
I think NASSCOM just came out with a compendium of best practices across companies, which actually is a very good collation of some of the really interesting work that is happening across companies around mental health for their employees. I would highly encourage people to take a look at it.
Yeah. One thing, Sujit, in this whole remoteness, right? I think what I'm hearing is people are working harder than before, and there is no boundaries around work life, sitting at home. So I think, particularly in a product company, I think I think we need to structure that for our employees much more and have no screen days and weekends. And I think all of that, comes from the culture. And, I think we need to shine a bigger light on that.
Okay, got it. Shilpa?
Yeah, I think, there are no more questions in the queues.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else that strikes you that we haven't covered? I mean, the areas that we have to address, if you have to summarize it.
I think, Sujit, I think this mental health, last question actually is a very important trend. Actually, it's not just a question. We at SaaSBoom, we had a Sathi as an event. At the company, we're seeing employees are saying after 6 months, they are feeling burnout. So I think it would require equal amount of effort, because we're looking at a titanic shift in the work culture. So while all as companies, we are beneficial of highest productivity, right? Because you can, meetings only 1 hour, there is no chit chat before or after, there are no coffee breaks, you don't know meeting of people or going down for a smoke break like that. So the productivity overall has increased, but that also led to a lot of loneliness and not able to connect with your people. So I think at industry level, we would need something equal amount of focus will need to be done to bring the balance out. As we are talking about benefits of tier 2 town and being virtual and access anything anywhere, I think this will become a major, or is a major topic, will require a institution and ecosystem level solution as well.
I'd like to draw an analogy to what happened in 9/11, right? There was so much anxiety for traveling in airplanes at that time after 9/11 that it was a real problem. It was actually something that needed treatment. And this is much more on a massive worldwide scale, what is happening right now. So definitely have that cusp where, things are being, people are being put under pressure, which is unnatural. And these will come in. And I think it's up to companies, it's up to individuals, up to the healthcare community as well, all of us to realize that mental health is exactly the same as physical health, and there's no difference and there's no shame in it. And I think Atul also mentioned it's taboo as a subject, but I think this is the time where we have to make that push. It's very clear. I think in iCertis as well, we've been dealing with this head on as a company all hands kind of point of discussion.
If I may add one comment to the one that is not related to mental health, but has an implication or connection to it, is of gender participation in the workforce. I think the US is seeing probably one of the most tectonic dropouts of women in the workforce after the post-World War II joining of women, which contributed to the US's GDP, growth. And we are seeing that in India. And I think the element of this change in working model of really managing the home and work, that is definitely adding to additional stress. And if I look at the numbers in India, we were low. In fact, if you were following this topic even 2 years back, there was an Economist article about why India needs women to work just for her economic growth. And that has, in fact, from 35% in 2005 has fallen to 26% now. This was before the pandemic. So now the pandemic, if you add to it, each one of us needs to pay specific attention to what this is causing to women participation in our workforce and what does that mean to our economy.
Yeah, no, very true. Okay. Any last words? Anything that we missed out that anybody wants to talk about?
One thing, if I may, one comment that I had to that question about Kerala having more services companies come as startups. I think I have a very strong opinion there in a way that any startup, any entrepreneurship is good for the country, whether it is services or product. I think most of us entrepreneurs came from a services background anyway, most of us at least. And it's a huge learning ground. It is, it's something that pays you when you're learning. As an entrepreneur, you get the best of, or the potential entrepreneur, you get a best of both worlds. And I would tell Gopal that he shouldn't be disappointed. Please fund the services companies as well, as long as the business model is sustainable.
Okay. One last question, something that Monish had said at the beginning. Let me ask, and Ram had also kind of said it's all moving to a cloud world. Monish had said it's on-premise is stupidity. So is that Rohini and Ram? On-premise is stupidity. I mean, it's all moving to the cloud?
It's moving to cloud, yes, but not necessarily off of private data centers. So I think depends on the industry you're in. Certain industries, regulatory-wise, needs to have their data not on public cloud. And so we are not seeing, that's where, multi-cloud is becoming more and more prevalent is what we are seeing. We are seeing a reversal, right? There was a big push to public cloud at one point. It was either or. I think now we are hearing and. So we are seeing private cloud growing as much, obviously there is a big push towards public cloud. And I think enterprises are also getting a lot more savvy about how to manage the workload across both. And to that end, I think where the dialogue is shifting is on the operational efficiency. Because the ability to operate a multi-cloud environment is a different challenge. Because, let's say you have administrators who are managing your cloud. You can't train them on 5 different tools or 3 different tools or whatever number of tools there are. I think what we are seeing as a trend is, and that's where I think our focus has been, on how do you streamline a single pane of glass management of your cloud strategy across multiple clouds, right? And be able to move workloads easily across from public cloud to private cloud and back. And be able to do all of those kind of things without having to keep retraining people on new ways of doing things or having 2 different teams, right? I mean, in the past, you would have an administrative team for cloud and you have another administrative team for on-prem, for bare metal, etc. I think those things are going away. We are seeing a lot of that happening. And I think that's what's bringing industries together also. For example, we work with Azure, we work with AWS, we work with the others. And that's the number one conversation is, how do we ease the ability to manage cloud strategy for customers and be able to do that? And I think that's definitely happening. So I don't know if it is, either or, it's definitely and that's what we are seeing.
Okay.
Growing trend.
Rohini?
A stupidity comment, if I may, came from the came from the fact that if you're deploying a software service, it doesn't make sense to deploy it on-prem. It has to be on the cloud, whether it is private cloud or public cloud. I think there's this other technology that's slowly creeping up, which is homomorphic encryption, where you actually have the data without being decrypted, actually have algorithms and software run on it. So at some point, this is going to change. The public cloud, private cloud kind of difference is going to kind of go away. But till then, the private cloud is absolutely a reality.
I was add another point there to what Ram and Munish talked about. So yeah, I mean the hybrid, what we call the hybrid world, is definitely the reality. And the other element which is coming into here is the number of devices and edge computing that is coming out, wherein you are actually not even talking about clouds. You're talking about really intelligence at the edge, right? And when we see 5G coming up, this will become even more accelerated. So in fact, the cloud definition is a good debate to have, but we have to keep in mind that many of our latency requirements and many of our use cases will really require you to be able to apply your algorithms where the data is, okay. and combinations thereof. So in my mind, the movement from private, hybrid, on-prem, whatever you want to call it, to public cloud, multi-cloud, that will continue. But in some ways, the data pipelines will have to work to make sure that you are finally doing the business impact that you are looking to solve the use case for.
Okay. Those may also be clouds. I think Rohini's point is very valid, but I think there could be different sizes of clouds that are getting deployed. Cloud doesn't mean data center. I think that's the point.
No, yeah, agreed. So the definition will also evolve.
Okay, yeah, I think we run out of time. I think Atul, you mentioned it, and there's this question that we lack product management skills. And there's this question from Gopal saying, can you recommend one or two good books on product management?
Yeah,
anybody?
Shoot me an email. We are actually going to start getting into product management 101 series as part of NASSCOM product skills. You can Google and you will find the website.
Mm-hmm. Hey, as a practicing product manager for many years, I would say, unfortunately, it's not a course that is taught in college, right? Unlike engineering, which you can teach, it's actually an apprentice model. So you got to learn from others. And I think what Atul is pointing the person to is really a compendium of people's knowledge that has been captured and learning from that. Because product management skills typically come from various varieties of, ability to manage your customers, your internal cohorts, ability to synthesize, right? You don't build what your customer tells you as an adage that product managers are taught right from the beginning. You build what you believe is the problem, that their unstated need that comes up. And discovering that unstated need is not an easy thing. So while there are a lot of books, but what I would encourage people to do is have conversations with practicing product managers, watch videos of people talking about their learnings and their various nuances. There are some really good people that you can follow on social media, who really bring that forward. So I think it's an apprentice model. Pardon?
I think of one or two social media.
Well, I don't want to recommend people here, but but there are several, and I think you will discover that if you go on Twitter, etc. You can find them. They're welcome to go look at people I'm following and see. I do follow many of them, but happy to. Not that I'm asking people to come, to like me, but they're more than welcome to go see. But I don't want to call out names here.
Okay, sure.
I think the best way to learn is do an internship in a product company under a product manager.
Okay,
that's the apprentice model, right? You learn
do an internship. Okay.
Hey, there's one recommendation I from a personal thing. There's Chris Anderson's book called Free. Chris Anderson, I think he was the editor of Wired magazine, and it's a very fundamental. How do you do management, pricing, product marketing, very fundamentals kind of. If you're interested in going into that area, so there are a few books that are very interesting. It's as Manav rightly said, I think it's an art to a large extent. So how do you learn painting? You will go work with the the better painters.
You can't read books and do it. Yeah.
Sujit, the skill movement is all about bringing everything under one umbrella, including third-party content, courseware, free stuff, all of that. We're bringing it under one umbrella with hundreds of practitioners. So it'll be all experiential learning. You can Google, you'll find it, NASSCOM product skills. One last thing I want to point out, Sujit, is, Bharat, what we call Bharat, right? Consumption of computing in semi-urban and rural India. I know there's a big capital problem, that there's a big monetization problem. I think that's the humongous opportunity that products and startups will tackle eventually around things like voice, vernacular, video, how we can change the lives of, a billion people, right? Not just us living in large cities. So I think that's also taking off. There's a massive movement, a lot of passionate people there. So, that's something to watch out for. I just want to thank you, Sujit and Shilpa, for, being such strong proponents of technology in India and the product ecosystem and the startup ecosystem. You do a wonderful job, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Atul.
Nice.
Thanks so much.
You shine a
And
light on what...
Thanks. And we had a great discussion, some great headline points, Y2K moment, tear in the space-time fabric. So I guess it's a takeoff moment in some sense. Possibly history will probably bear it out. But we have challenges, as all of you said. There are product management skills issues. We are not terribly good at monetization and marketing and sales. India consumption has to grow. Enterprises should start working with Indian startups. Academia should start working a lot more closely with this environment. But as all of you said, funding is no longer an issue, and the whole ecosystem is now actually coming together, has done it for some time now, and it's really come together now, matured to help each other. So it's a matter of time, I guess, before we see some real big successes. I mean, already, I think Manav, Manthan, iCertis, and all are already such big successes. I'm sure we're going to see enormous successes in the coming years. Great discussion. Thanks to all of you. Ram, Rohini, Atul, Manav, Manish, thanks a lot.
Our pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.